Meet Christopher Chiz Chisolm, actor, writer, producer, and director, who was part of the original launch team that started E! Entertainment Television.
Having started his journey in the theater, Chiz would later go into TV and movies, eventually running a brick-and-mortar studio and watching the technology and business of entertainment evolve over a long career.
Welcome to Scratch Claw Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Jo Cones.
And I'm Brandon Duke. Let's go. Welcome to the show, Mr. Chiz Chisolm.
Thank you very much.
Chiz.
Good morning, Billy Joe and Brandon. How are you?
Doing
Good.
well. So right at the top of the show, we have a ritual we like to do with all of our guests. We call it the 60-second intro. Billy's going to put you on the clock. She's going to tell you to go, and you're going to tell us who you are and what you do in 60 seconds. Think of it like blackjack. You're trying to go right up to a minute, but not over. And then after that, we'll deep dive.
Fantastic.
Billy?
All right.
Sound good? Are you ready, Chiz?
Standing by.
All right, and go.
Hi, I'm Chiz Chisolm. I'm originally from Maine. I grew up in Maine, went to the University of Miami for my undergraduate studies in film, television, theater. Then I went to the University of London and studied with the Royal Shakespeare Company, apprenticed with the Royal Shakespeare Company. I'm a Shakespeare nut. And then lived in New York City for 10 years, pursuing a theatrical career, started doing more movies and TV. Then I moved out to Los Angeles for 25 years, started a little cable network and production companies as an actor, writer, producer, director, a creative executive. And after 25 years in LA, I decided I would go pursue other things. So I'm now in Austin, Texas. I managed a motion picture studio that we acquired a couple years ago and have a film and television production company that produces feature films and television series. And I'm an independent producer who loves actors, and I love the business, and I love creatives.
Oh my God.
Look at
Right
that.
on. Right on. That was beautiful. Wow.
And I do a lot of voiceovers because people always tell me you have a great voice, you should be in radio, but I've only been in radio for about 35 years. However, we know what a minute is.
Only?
In radio, right? Exactly. We know what a minute is. So that's kind of the thumbnail, right?
Yeah, no, I had that theory like right at the top. The first guy that we had on the show, he has been an actor, a producer, a writer, weather guy. He worked with autistic children. I mean, he's done everything, but he so got it right on the nose with the minute. I was like, wow. But then other people who don't have that background sometimes are really close to, and I'm like, I think somehow it's just like in our biological clocks,
Right. The inner ticker, the inner ticking.
Yeah, but we've noticed anyone who works like in TV or radio tends to get it like almost right within a second or two of getting it like right on. It's kind of uncanny.
Yeah. Or sometimes they cheat and set their own timer.
Yeah.
Well,
Which I'm not going to begrudge them.
It also helps you to set the bullet points from what you pick up from that 60-second intro to talk about, right?
Yeah, that was Billy's thing because she had an experience that she can probably tell you about much better.
We've heard about it on other podcasts, but basically I just, it's like I've been a server for so long that when you are a server and you only have like a tiny amount of time with people, you get good at picking up on little things and pulling on threads. And so you don't need someone to explain their entire life story in depth.
Right.
To have a good conversation with them. And especially it's better if you don't, it's just like going off of what you just said right now. I'm like, the reason I asked you on the podcast is because, there are lots of people who are actors and who have a lot of the background you do, but the fact that you started your own film studio and yay, the strikes currently, we can talk about it. But right. But like, I'm curious what drove you to do that. So, I mean, I don't know if we want to start there or,
well,
we can
I'll
work
tell you
backwards.
what drove me to this career is my first laugh. The first time I was ever on stage, people talk about getting the bug, but we all know it. If we're in it, we have the passion for it. not only do you find that it's exciting and you love it, but there's a certain gift set. And I believe in gift sets. I believe in God-given gifts, and I believe if you pursue them and follow them and press on and pursue it, that's my big thing whenever I mentor or work with people or network or work with younger people. My thing is always, if you want to do it, you can do it. You can do it. There are so many different avenues to express your artistic gift set. Writing, directing, acting, producing. I've been a creative executive, and I just want my message to my colleagues and everyone in the entertainment business that I work with is encouragement, because there's more work than ever. There's more outlets than ever. There's more jobs than ever. Thank God these strikes are over. The floodgates will open. There's a massive market outside of Los Angeles. I lived there for 25 years. I know. New York and LA may be big towns, but there's a lot happening across this country. And in pursuing that, I really feel that encouragement and a gracious, generous embrace of our colleagues is probably the best thing to do. So in 5th grade, we had to write a book report for Mrs. Hall. I grew up in Maine, on the coast of Maine, a little town called Cape Elizabeth. And we had to do a book report the first semester of school that year. And I had an idea to write a play. And I said, Mrs. Hall, I don't want to do a book report. She said, oh, you don't? I said, no, I want to write a play. She said, well, you write that play, Mr. Chiz. So I wrote that play, and it was called The Littles. It was kind of an allegorical, metaphoric story of little people who found a mouse hole. They were homeless, and they had to learn how to coexist with mice. Talk about big thinker in 5th grade. So I got an A on that book report. And the next semester on the writing the play, I wrote the play. It was called The Littles. And then the next semester we had another book report done. And I said, I have another idea for another play. And she said, no, you're not going to write another play. You're going to produce the one that you wrote last semester. I want you to write it. You wrote it. I want you to direct it, produce it, and star in it at Town Hall, which was the big theater in my small town on the coast of Maine. And it ran for 2 nights, and it was my first laugh. And it was also, I realized what being a hyphenate was before we even knew what the word hyphenate meant in our business. I wrote it, produced it, I directed it, I cast all my friends in it, and the theater was sold out 2 nights in a row on a Friday and Saturday in my little town in Maine, and it set me on my way. Even then, I was collaborating with kids in my classes that had real creative juice. And went on to be in all the plays in high school, and then majored in theater and film and television in college. And I started my career writing a play that I started, basically. And I loved it. I've always loved it.
So it sounds like you embrace the idea of making your own opportunities very early on. And like carrying on to like now, is that kind of the thing that spurred you on to buying the studio? I mean, like, obviously you're starting off as an actor, but it seems like it's a common theme on this show where people realize if you really want to do your thing, is that you almost have to develop that other side of like being not just kind of like the agent. You've got to be the person in charge of like, doling out the agency to saying, okay, now I have to be a producer if I want, and go do these things like, make your own movies or make your own podcast, whichever, et cetera, and go towards that end in order to come back and do the thing you originally wanted to do. Is that kind of like what you found as far as like getting into that other side of it?
That's very, very true. Very accurate, Brandon. First of all, most of the work that I've gotten in my entire career, over 35 years, has been not from my agents, but from my friends and other people I've worked with, because work begets work. And when you work, you make friends. So work begets friends, and friends beget more friends, and friends beget work. And when you're in it, you just start networking. That's the most important thing. It's staying connected with the business and pressing on, and you must always be working. In other words, if you're not working on a paying gig, you still have to be pouring your resources, your energy, and your cash, literally investing in your career. More equipment, better clothing, keeping yourself, well fed, well dressed, well rehearsed, sing, dance, acting class. You must always be in class. Go taking film courses, just being motivated to always be creating, always be doing. So through a course of many, many years, starting media companies, starting cable networks that we'll probably talk about, and pursuing an acting career, one thing I learned is that when you're married and you have a wife and 3 children and a mortgage and 2 car payments, if you're not really hitting it as an actor in Los Angeles, you better get producing and directing, and you better find other ways to express and use your creativity instead of, taking the job or the side hustle or the gig to support an acting career. So I think I was very, very blessed in the fact that I had a lot of friends. I networked in New York and Los Angeles very well, and it turned into friends begetting work, work begetting friends, work begetting work, work begetting friends, friends begetting work. So after, a long and varied career in New York and then Los Angeles, and including Minneapolis, Miami, New England, and other places that I've lived through my peripatetic creative career. In 2021, I got a call from a friend who said there was an opportunity in Austin, Texas, and there was a studio that was built by a former Paramount Pictures executive who was from Texas, but had been out in California for a number of years. He was a Sony and Paramount Pictures exec. And when he left Hollywood when he was 65, he said, I'm going to go back to Texas, build my own studio. And he did. And that became available. And I actually ran that studio for 2 years. I learned a great deal about the marketplace here. We transferred it to another major media conglomerate. And then I formed my own production entity, a media and communications and production company here in Austin. Because like you found, Billy Joe, being from Wisconsin originally and working and living in Minneapolis for so many years, you found a great home and creative community in Atlanta. And I found that in Texas too. I never thought I'd end up in Texas, but I love it. I'm in a small town outside of Austin, ran that studio for 2 years, met everyone in the creative community here, and have been, going great guns since I got here. So again, it's about, I think I like to work with great people who work on great projects and have great skills and gift sets, working to produce a great, great product and try to have fun doing it, And I've been very, very, very blessed to do that.
So you said you ran it for 2 years.
Yeah, it's called,
but you own it now?
No, actually, we transferred it to there was a big media conglomerate came in, and I'll either end up doing a housekeeping deal there or work with them, because my whole thing is about creating content to produce motion pictures as a storyteller. So in shepherding the brick and mortar facility to a bigger developer, and it's going to be expanded, and the business, like what's happened with Tyler Perry and Trilith Studios, formerly Pinecrest in the greater Atlanta area, and all of the studios popping up in Georgia. It's also happening here in Texas too. I think we're not competing with Los Angeles. We're kind of competing with each other now. New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, of course, Georgia. Part of the reason is because it's not imperative or vital or even necessary to be Los Angeles or New York based anymore. I think that's a good part of the technology that we have, the creatives around the country, and the fact that people want to live elsewhere. I love LA. I love New York. I lived in both cities, and I've loved everywhere I've ever lived, even cold Minneapolis, St. Paul. But
I love Minneapolis, St. Paul too.
It's a great, great city. Yeah.
It really is. So with being bought by the media conglomerate, so I'm just curious where that leaves the studio in regards to something like the strike. So, for instance, A24, got to keep producing because they agreed to all the terms. And to me, I'm like, well, we're still in this in-between land because the actors could turn down the contract if the AI protections are not good enough.
Correct.
Right? And I hope they do. But, if that were to, even if they were to ratify the contract and it wasn't good enough, I'm just curious what happens with all these other companies. Like, can you compete? Can say, we're going to do things our own way. We don't have to deal with the AMPTP, because a lot of people have been saying that the whole way along. Hey, we can produce our own stuff and we can find a way to distribute it. We're not all Taylor Swift, but we can find a way to distribute it, because that's more democratic now, right? Like we have the ability to just distribute stuff on our own and to find people in a way we didn't before, right?
Right.
So I'm
Okay.
curious with your studio,
Well, Taylor did
how
a
that
deal
works.
with, yeah, I know Taylor Swift did a deal with AMC, you know, and I've got connections to AMC because I know the usher and the concessionaire that sells me popcorn at the AMC right over. No, you know, this is a great point. This is a great point for us and probably for this particular audience. This is what I think. I think that independent film is in a new wave. It's a new rebirth for independent film. Tentpole pictures there's $200 million spent on the Marvels. It made 47 million opening weekend. That's a tough loss. What we're seeing is the streamers have, you know, really they poured a lot of money into it. There's been a lot of work, but they're not really accountable to, you know, what their box office or streaming numbers are. And also, I think this is a time for us to recognize we don't need those nuclear powerhouses of New York and particularly LA. New York's where the money is. LA's where the talent and the, you know, where the studios are. We don't need them to make independent films. And people want to watch real storytelling. And these tentpole pictures, you know, I love the big experience films. I love Marvel and Star Wars and Fast and Furious. It's like going to a theme park. It's a theme park ride. But there's a difference between movies, those tentpole pictures, the Marvel and Star Wars and Fast and Furious, you know, the Mission Impossibles, and storytelling. And the difference between movies and cinema is the difference between going to Disneyland and going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in my opinion. That's where I'm in violent agreement with Martin Scorsese when he says, you know, it's movies, but that's not cinema. There's a difference, you know, but there's room for all of us. But perhaps more room now for the independent filmmaker. And that's one of the things I really love about Central Texas, particularly in Austin. It is an independent film capital. And I think Georgia has been a big budget picture capital because of the resources and brick and mortar facilities you have there. But what it's really done is it's helped create an independent film creative community that I think is so good for us to pursue and press into before, during, and particularly after this strike, because we're going to have to renegotiate in 3 years anyway. And I'm not sure it's going to be ratified. We will see. So the answer to the question is this. I think that this is the best time in a long time for independent filmmakers. And now we're seeing there are other ways to develop, produce, and distribute independent film and our own content, whether it be long format, feature film or television shows, or series on YouTube, even TikTok, Instagram, etc. There's even an influencer contract now with the Screen Actors Guild. Unheard of just 10 years ago. Of course, what they want to do is monetize and organize labor for, you know, the union, but it's a smart move because that's where a lot of the money is gravitating.
I wanted to ask you about the, you mentioned earlier about the technology, and I think it's stuff like that's helped kind of decentralize the movie industry. You're talking about like we're now like Austin is popping up. Atlanta's been doing the thing, you know, probably since the late aughts, like early 2010s. I think that's like right about the time that, you know, they instituted the tax breaks. And then again, we got like Pinecrest, now Trilith. And then it seems like at least once a month you hear about a new studio trying to be built here in Atlanta. And it's also like, we've seen like with the, you know, with all these technologies, one of the things like I chafe a little bit when I hear people, I mean, yes, like obviously Marvel and Star Wars are not the same thing as like these kind of aren't like, you know, the, I guess like classic cinema or whatever. But what I see coming out of that is like some of the technologies they develop are something that one day, like as it gets better and better and better, will now like enable independent filmmakers to do stuff like all over, because like with Star Wars, they have this thing now out in LA called The Volume, where it's almost like a little theater where they could just project the background on there, and it makes it look a lot more realistic with the lighting. Cause like, we've all seen like those green screen, movies where the light just doesn't quite look right, but again, that technology that's being developed by like these big tent poles will one day actually, trickle down to like, the indie filmmakers. And suddenly I feel like you're going to empower, like, maybe not for us, but like this later generation, they're going to be able to take advantage of that. I think it'll, if anything else, because we've already seen it too with the, just with like how like cameras have gotten better and better and better, like over, like where 20 years ago, like, yeah, like the idea of shooting something on your phone was unheard of.
Right.
Like,
right.
If you had mentioned that to someone, they'd be like, get out of here. But now it's like, you can literally go you can shoot on high def on your phone, edit it on a computer that you can probably spend like, $60 a month for Adobe and buy like a reasonably cheap computer. Like, and you can make an actual short film for cost that was unimaginable, 15 to 20 years ago.
And there's even
I wanted to ask you about that because you're like, with being in your studio and being in Texas, you got to be seeing all this stuff. Like, talk to us about like, where do you see that trend going for as like, again, like as the technology gets better and better and better. And again, you're in Austin, which, it's beginning to emerge more and more as like another one of these alternatives to LA. Talk about these trends and how you see that kind of proliferating in filmmaking. And
that's really great because the past 2 years of my life in running a brick and mortar studio, a lot of the meetings that I take, and I met a lot of the creative community, but we're in a very technical business. I fully embrace the new XR technology, which is the volume walls you're talking about. And for our audience, if you haven't seen it yet, go and just Google the YouTube behind the scenes of The Mandalorian, the volume wall, and also The Batman. And one is about a 6.5 minute video, the Mandalorian video, which is really intriguing and fascinating. And I think the Batman behind the scenes is 2.5 minutes. I've shown those to so many different investors and producers and technology people that have come in to work with us because it's like a master course in what XR and volume walls are. LED walls, the size of green screens, that you get the perfect in-camera picture right behind you. Instead of the cyclorama being painted chroma key blue or green and then spending literally on a big budget picture millions of dollars on post-production for rotoscoping and CGI and animation and fixing the spill and the lighting and everything. It's all in camera. And the initial investment, because we're looking at XR technology right now for one of our stages, in the new facility that I'm in, I'm opening a studio that is going to be an XR stage as well as a black box insert stage. This technology, there's several of these in Atlanta, a couple in LA. There's one, there's a small one and a larger one that just opened here in the Austin area. And this technology is amazing. So look at those for all of us, but particularly for your audience. Look at behind the scenes with The Mandalorian and the Batman. The other thing I always tell people when I'm talking to investors or creatives or technical people, we're in an extraordinarily creative business as storytellers and as lovers of our art and what we do. But we're also in an extraordinarily technical business because when you think about it, Edison had to invent a camera to make movies. I mean, the camera, sound, color, widescreen, 3D, surround sound, XR, VR, AR, augmented reality, extended reality, and of course, virtual reality. The metaverse, I think also the future of this technology is we're going to see more and more convergence of an interactive experience for the viewer, because after COVID and after the strikes and with all this AI, one of the things audiences want, and the reason we're not flocking back to the theaters, is we have everybody with a big screen TV and surround sound basically has a beautiful, viewing experience at home. The movie theaters are great for the big tentpole pictures, but you can get pretty much anything at home, almost day and date to opening many pictures. And what the audience is going to expect and soon demand is a more exciting, interactive experience in that place. Like you were describing the LED wall, the volume wall. But look at the new Sphere venue in Las Vegas. I mean, I think that it's not just going to be something that's the occasional attraction like IMAX was, but we now see IMAX technology in theaters and THX and surround sound everywhere in all the major theaters. I think there's going to be a real increase in the quality and the excitement of attending motion pictures, as well as for real stories as well. So getting back to the technology, we can't make movies if we don't have a technology base. And I think the most important thing to remember as creatives is that we are utterly dependent not only on technology, but those skilled craftspeople that are the department heads and the people who work in makeup, hair, wardrobe, scenic design, post-production, graphics, camera, lighting, all this stuff. These people that's what makes it happen. And that's the exciting thing I've learned in the past couple of years is really the ecosystem of a brick and mortar facility, because I had been involved in an initiative like this before, building a motion picture studio. We got a small facility on a large property, and then we put together a vision and initiative to take a 30,000 square foot four sound stages and 30,000 square feet to expand that to 300,000 square feet with a mixed use destination with fine dining, upscale retail, an amphitheater, a boutique hotel, and mixed use, residential and office space, very much like Trilith, because that's a beautiful model. Trilith didn't invented it, but they certainly improved upon it and made it a world-class destination for creatives like us. And so the convergence of technology and creativity, the future is here now. We're looking at the future, but it's here as far as XR technology and what's happening. And the availability of the technology literally in our hands, with everything from cell phones to the internet, the capabilities that we have for telling our stories are amazing. So surround yourself with great people who have great knowledge, and keep making movies, keep making shows, keep making shorts, keep doing video, keep doing theater, keep acting, keep writing, keep directing. You want to be a writer? Write. You want to be a director? Direct. You want to make movies? Make movies. That's again, getting back to the encouragement of our creative community. For me, is if you want to do it, just do it. It is kind of the Nike philosophy. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of a roundabout way to say how much we're dependent on technology, but also how it's so smart of us to embrace the technology instead of saying, "Oh, this is too much. It's too future, man." No, it's here.
Yeah, it gives us opportunities we didn't used to have.
Yeah.
But I want to bring it back to your own journey, and I'm just curious because sometimes you get people on the show who are very who seem just like they have it all put together, they have everything. And I was telling Brandon a while back, I listened to a Clubhouse interview with somebody once, and for me, when I'm listening to these people speak, it's the struggles that make you connect with them and that make you go, oh, well, if this person is super successful now and they struggled too, then I can get there too. Like that's the journey. And this guy that was on the Clubhouse interview was just like, oh no, I just fell into it, and I just I got successful right away. I mean, like, that's basically the gist of his story. And I was like, this is awful. And I was chatting with some people that I knew, and was like, this is terrible to listen to, isn't it? Like, he's giving us nothing that is useful to us, or inspiring in any way. It's just like, yeah, it was just easy for me. I'm like, great for you. Okay. Yeah. But for you, it seems like you learned the lesson early of, your teacher taught you the lesson of, no, you're going to do this. You're going to be a producer, right? You're going to make the thing that you wanted to make. Was there any point, like, oftentimes in our lives, we have to relearn those lessons many times. So I guess from that point in your life, when you were a kid to becoming an adult and doing this professionally, was there any point that you had to relearn that lesson?
Or reinvent yourself, I think. They say that the very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. Well, in a career, when you've had 10,000 auditions, right, and you've booked 800 jobs, that's a lot. You know what I mean? whether it be theater, commercial, voiceover, television, feature films. You look at people's credits on IMDb, you don't see all those other things like theater, corporate, voiceovers, off Broadway, off Broadway, off Broadway. All the time people spend making films and YouTubes and their own videos. And even, in the old days, Super 8 or 16 or just, doing your own thing. Always be working, always be creating, because I've had to reinvent myself almost daily. You have to press into it, because when you think about, people talk about, I don't know how you take the rejection. If you knew how exciting it is to book the work, to do the work, and to be in the work, you'd understand why we can go to 10,000 auditions in a career and book 800 jobs. That's a lot. Billy Joe, you and I come out of the theater, and we love the theater. Brandon, do you have a theatrical background, stage background as well?
I did some theater in college, which is kind of like how I got into, this kind of stuff. But I didn't, I never aspired to be an actor. I wanted to be a writer and a director. And because my school didn't have a film, there was no film school at Georgia Southern University where I went. I did broadcasting and theater to kind of like synthesize the closest I could get to it.
You cobbled together.
I have an appreciation of all the theater stuff.
Okay, so for years, I'm in a SAG-AFTRA, Equity, Producers Guild. I mean, every different guild and union and that I could possibly get in. And when you're an equity actor and you're booking 3 or 4 equity shows a year, and you're making $25,000 to $35,000, you are killing it. That is a big. Billy Joe will tell you. When you're doing theater as an equity actor and you're making a living and you are booking, you're killing it. And that more than half the time you'll be unemployed. Nobody goes from job to job to job to job to job. Jerry Seinfeld, it took him years to get another gig after 8 years of Seinfeld, but he did pretty well, comedians in cars getting coffee. But what I'm saying is, yes, it's very difficult. You gotta be in it to win it, and you gotta keep getting up to bat, but you also have to always be working. You got to pour into your craft, because it will pay off. And the networking. It's like, I talk about the 10,000 hour rules when I teach. I used to teach acting at the Stella Adler Academy in Los Angeles, and the business of show business and scene study, much like Ray's scene study class, Ray Burke, who we studied with, who's a genius, excellent teacher. And the thing I tell people is, you have to always be working. If you're between paying jobs, that's when the work really begins. Some of the best work you'll ever do will never be seen by anyone. Some of the best work you'll ever do, you'll never get paid for. Some of the best work you ever do will have a very small audience, but a great impact for you, your colleagues, your audience, and your career. So it's really difficult. In reinventing myself, I've had to reinvent myself 1,000 times. That's why if I was just an equity actor, I never would have been able to afford, I have a wife, I've got 3 kids, I've got a mortgage. Suddenly, on an equity actor salary, you're not going to really make ends meet. It's really, really challenging. So that's when I started producing and directing, and I started a production company and started doing corporate video and then producing more TV. But I did kind of step in it, and this is where Kismet and God's grace and blessing and divine intervention. I moved to LA in 1987 from New York. I was walking on Malibu Beach and I heard somebody go, "Hey, Chizzy!" It was a buddy of mine from the East Coast. And I bumped into him. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I just moved to LA about 45 days ago." And we were talking, and he knew me, we've known each other for a long time. And he said, "What are you doing Tuesday?" I said, "I'm an actor. I just moved to LA. I'm doing nothing." Of course, I'm doing nothing. I'm waiting for the phone to ring. He said, "I can't believe it. I want you to come down to this address on Tuesday." This was on a Sunday. "Come down to this address on Tuesday." He said, "I want you to interview Arnold Schwarzenegger on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's getting his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, throw on a jacket and tie. Come down to this address. And look, you're funny. You've got these improv skills. You're an actor. You can be a host. A newscaster, whatever." He said, "We're starting a new cable network, and we don't have any on-air talent or producers. I'm the VP of production. There's like 4 or 5 of us at the network, but we got this money and we're launching it this summer. So I was like, my head spinning. I'm like, yeah, of course, Jay, I'll be there. Went down to the studio. We go to the thing. It's they give me the press kit. This is how it started for me in Hollywood. They gave me the press kit. I'm reading it from the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the movie star, is getting the 1,863rd star on the Hollywood's legendary Walk of Fame. I read it real quick. And I start doing my Dan Aykroyd meets Joe Friday, wise guy, man on the street routine. And I'm standing there just going into kind of an improv. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Look at the arms on that guy from milking those Austrian cows with his mother. And there's his mom, Maria Shriver. Yes, the skinny, poor little kid that started on the slopes of Austria getting sand kicked in his face. No, it was snow. And came to Hollywood and made, and I just went on with this. And I read it, I improv, and then at the end of it, Schwarzenegger said, I want to know, who's that guy? Who's that guy? I want to talk to him. And we were at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. We were a brand new fledgling network. It was the first remote production and package we ever put together for this network. We went back to the pool, sat down, had a one-on-one interview. And he said, what is your name? And I said, I'm Chiz Chisholm. He goes, what is a Chiz? And I said, that's my nickname. My name is Christopher Chisholm. And he said, Chiz, I like Chiz. I like that guy. Anytime we do anything, I want to be with that guy. He likes a big cigar. And he goes, go ahead, ask me questions. We sat, we did an interview. It was the first interview that ever was on E! Entertainment Television. And I was on the launch team and the founding team of E! Entertainment Television with it. That was in March of 1987. And on July 31st, 1987, we premiered live on the air. It turned into a job that lasted 4 years. I learned how to write for television, how to produce, how to develop programming, how to edit, how to promote, how to market, how to brand. And I was one of the first dozen people there. And it grew to over 150 people within a couple of years. There were 300 people there in 3 years. We were the fastest growing cable network in the history of cable TV at the time. And now it's got a market cap of $2.5 billion. And it is E! Entertainment Television, home of the Kardashians, which you can't blame me for, because I wasn't there when the Kardashians.
I wasn't going to put that on you, man.
Thank you.
No.
I was there when Greg Kinnear was
there.
You know
what? You only create the children and you raise them. You can't help if they go off and do things you don't approve of, right?
You are correct. But anyway, so that
I want to ask you though. Okay, so was there ever any? Oh, okay, no. Chiz, was there ever any opportunity? Because something like that, I think oftentimes, especially when we're in the actor scarcity mentality and things like that, sometimes we go, oh, I can't do that right now. Or, you don't see the open door for what it is. And so I'm wondering if there was ever any open door like that you didn't take someone up on, that you regretted because it turned into something that you did not see at the time.
Yes. My first agent in Hollywood was a good, very good, actually, mid-sized boutique agency. And because I was working so much, I got some career advice that I think would have advanced my career in another way. And I'm not talking just about money or, fame or fortune. And by the way, for everybody, if it's about fame or fortune, forget the fame, take the fortune, by the way, take the money. And then just do your art and craft. When you get 10 million in the bank, open your barn theater up in the woods and do your real, do Shakespeare. But that's my passion, But you have to be careful about saying yes. This is a very important lesson. You say yes and you get tied up in something that's going to lock you down for a while, and then you're missing other opportunities. Now, this happens all the time, and that's just the way it goes. But sometimes the most powerful thing is no, because we get to this starvation mentality, like you just said, starving artists. You start thinking, well, I need the gig. I got to take it. And I encourage everyone that I work with and teach and talk to and lecture to and do interviews with, I would do everything. People go, I'm not doing commercials. I'm only doing film. I'm not doing theater. I'm only doing television. No, you do theater, you do film, you do television, you do commercials, do videos, do corporate, do live events, do speaking engagement, everything, because it all adds to your bag of tricks, your toolkit that you have these great tools and experiences to apply your craft with and apply to your workspace. So one of the things is the power of no, but there is kind of that, man, I got rent, I have a car payment, I've got 3 kids, or I've got a mortgage, I've got a spouse, I've got a partner. I want to make sure that the ends meet. So there was a time when I had an opportunity to do a lot more mainstream television and film work, but I was working at a cable network producing and developing programming, and which was an amazing, at the time, I thought I was making a mistake. And I said, I lost agents because I was working, because suddenly they've got a young, hot, or any talent that they want to work with. Agents want to work with us, and they work for us. They work with us. We don't work for them. We work for the project, but they want to work with us. That's why they sign us. But there's a window where you really have to pour into that relationship. But if you're booked and you're never available, then they can't do much with you. So it's it's a very fine balance. Also, with your agent, you have to take it right to the edge of being a total pain in the butt. You have to take it right to the edge of annoyance. But then you make up for it when you go in and visit every couple of weeks and bring a dozen bagels with cream cheese. Or you buy pizza or coffee and donuts for the office. People remember you. Billy Joe, she'll be here. Billy Joe is coming in Friday. I know there'll be bagels and cream cheese. It's just little things that are relational. Because it's a very relational business that we're in. People don't forget.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things we've noticed from talking to a lot of different people is like you were saying, it's like relational, but I feel like it's like kind of like the personal touch, but also kind of not so much as the schmoozing or, I don't, for lack, there's all other times of words we could use, but just kind of like being genuine and sincere in your interactions, just kind of like, just being genuinely nice and pleasant, be that person that's like, oh, and they smile when you see, oh yeah, here, this guy's coming. He's going to give us bagels, or she's coming along and we're going to get donuts. Is it kind of just that little bit of kindness going a long way with all that? Like, obviously you've kind of gone up, kind of up one side and down of the business. And it's like, has that been kind of your experience, is just kind of like staying open and kind of trying to kind of do things with some genuine politeness and just kind
that's
of using that as
that's a really great question. I've been in casting sessions with other producers, casting directors. We'll be sitting there and, you're going through hundreds of actors. You're going through hundreds of headshots and resumes, whether it be online or hard copy. And you get down between, maybe down to 10, then 5, then you're down to 3 people. And I can't tell you the number of times I've heard, I like them both, but Brandon's easier to work with. He's just easier to work with. He's just a better personality, better human being. I like them both, but as a matter of fact, Freddie might have the edge, but I'd rather work with Brandon. He's easy to work with. He takes direction. He's just a nice guy. I've heard that so many times, because toxic people take time and energy and suck good vibes and positive energy out of the air. That's number one. Number 2 is I have auditioned people in the theater, film, and television world that I have cast years later, because I never forgot. Here's one of the things actors hate, and I hate to say it as a producer or director, and I hate to hear it as an actor. You're not right for the project. You're just not right. You're just not right. If I need John Goodman, I'm not going to try to get Pee Wee Herman. I might see him and read him and really love him. If I want George Clooney, I'm not going to go get Nathan Lane. You know what I mean? It's just, there are reasons that characters are characters.
Well, it's famously, Tom.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, famously, Tom Hiddleston went out for the role of Thor and ended up getting Loki, which now is why he's famous.
Exactly. No, that's right. That's another great story too. But this has happened to me so many times. You don't forget people that you really know are really good, that you really like. And I've cast people 2, 3, 5 years later from one audition. They made such an impact on me, but they really just weren't right. That's why you got to keep going on. It's like the miner that mines gold. You know, he's got his mine, and he's mining for gold for 30 years and finally gives up and sells it to the young buck gold miner. The gold miner, you know, the young kid goes in there 2 days later, he hits the mother lode. Well, if you just press on and just do it and keep on keeping on, that's the encouragement that's so important. We want everybody that wants to be in this business. I want you to know you can do it. You can get out there and work. I've had 1,000 different jobs, worn 1,000 different hats, played many different roles from above and below the line, creative, technical, writing, producing, acting, directing, as a creative executive, running a brick and mortar studio, starting cable networks, doing everything from commercials to corporate video. It's an incredible life. And you don't have to be a household name to make a really good living and have a really good run in this business.
I'm curious to know, like, what is it? Because I mean, you seem like you're very like it's again another reoccurring thing is people just kind of being open to those opportunities. But what is it that keeps you going during those lean times? Because it's again, when we tend to get in spaces like this, we're always talking about the stuff we did or the stuff that we booked or what worked. But it's not about all the stuff that didn't work. Like, and how do you keep going when it's not working?
Okay, so I'm trying to be kind here and not insult anyone, including myself, saying, boy, is that dumb, right? Getting back to the very definition of insanity. We believe we're gifted. We have goals. We do have dreams, and the dreams in our hearts are real. You know, they may be dreams, but dreams are real. And then when you see some fulfillment and delivery on those dreams, that keeps you going. It's very motivating. The other thing is, unlike law or medicine or business or gas or oil or real estate or any other industry, if you don't get it, you just don't get it. There's something in us that is a hunger. It is not a mad rush for endorphins. I mean, there's a lot of maladjusted miscreants that are not very good people, that are greatly rewarded by this business. We've seen it. There's a lot of crazy people in the world, from the Screen Actors Guild to Wall Street in Washington. But the bottom line is, there's a drive and a desire to express. And I think it comes down to, they call it the second oldest profession in the world is acting, because it's storytelling. And it's about touching people, and it's emotion and life and death and birth and faith. And it's about relationship and telling stories and emotion and history and hope for the future. There's something about what we do. Why do we sit in front of a TV? Why do we watch what we watch? Why do movies move us so much? They move us. Movies move us. And it's just light flickering on a wall, but it's storytelling, I think, that is so precious and important. It's a very intellectual and academic, but a very emotional and visceral experience. And when you get to be on the storytelling end, that's the payoff. That's the treasure. That's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or that's where you strike the mother lode in telling great stories and being part of it. I think that's really why we do it. We can't not do it.
So you mentioned all of the hats you've worn. I'm going to give you the hardest question. If you had to choose only one, because you said, my boyfriend just talked about this the other day about Bill Murray saying something about, like, why would you want to be famous? Take the money. Like, if you can be rich, just be rich. And then you'll probably, all the problems you had will probably go away, and then you can do whatever you want to do, right? But don't want to be famous. So for you, when you're talking about that, and if you had all the money in the world and you just could do whatever you wanted to do, but you could only choose one thing, what hat would you put on?
Acting. And very specifically, the stage. There's nothing like the emotional exchange between a live audience and a live performance. I don't believe it's a dying art. I don't think it will ever die. with all the movies and TV shows and all the, all the technology that we have, there's nothing like live theater. To be the artistic director or the manager, as I said in old England, of a theater company and build that barn up in the woods or be part of a successful playhouse, whether it be a regional or repertory theater, I think we see that is, for me, the most rewarding and enriching environment I've ever been in. And I love film and I love television. I love storytelling and entertainment, but nothing comes close. Not even close. I didn't have to think about it. I just wanted to think about how to express it, because I don't have to think about it. I didn't have to think about the answer. I had to think about how I wanted to answer, because it's so vital to be civilized and cultured. And, the arts and humanities, without that, we're less human. And the purest form, I think, of acting is in the theater. I always attend the theater, whatever city I'm living in. I've been to, Austin has a vibrant theater scene as well. There's also something about the classic nature. It's an academic and intellectual environment. And I like academia because you're always working with literature and old classics or new plays, or, but also the important thing for the actor, I think, is to have a very wide and varied knowledge of classic theater, because it informs modern storytelling and also the classic theater and theatrical technique and even method acting that came out of that era with Stanislavski and Stella Adler and Sanford Meisner and Lee Strasberg and Uta Hagen. Everything was about the theater. And out of that came the most realistic period in filmmaking and film acting, from Brando to De Niro and Pacino and just the stuff that inspires us. So that's the long answer. The one word is theater.
Well, speaking of stuff that inspires you, I just want to, also, this is another hard question, because for me anyway, people ask me like things that are my favorites. I always have to rack my brain a bit. Other people can just go, oh, no, it's this. This is my favorite thing of this thing. So I'm curious, two things. Do you have a thing that inspired you, either a play or a movie or something in the past, like when around the time that you wrote that first play that you were into? And then in the past few years, is there anything that you hold up as like, this thing really blew my mind?
Okay, so right around the same time as I wrote The Littles, maybe 11 or 12 years old, when I read my first adult big fat thick novel, and it was The Godfather. And my mother had read it. Everyone was reading Mario Puzo's Godfather back then. This was before the film was produced. When I read The Godfather, at that time in my career, in my life, in my career, it started at Town Hall doing The Littles, playing a mouse. But no, at that time in my life, I was into baseball, Westerns, and the mafia. I read everything I could. The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, the Valachi Papers, the story of Lucky Luciano and Bugsy Siegel and How the Mob. I loved gangster films as a kid, and Cagney and Bogart and all that stuff. And then the modern, mob pictures. And it was very romanticized, of course. But when I read The Godfather, it changed me so much. I was reading an adult novel. It was the fattest novel I had ever read. And I read it and I understood it. I could visualize this. And it just came to life for me. And my mom used to ask me, so Christopher, she was a Bostonian who had a real Boston accent. She'd say, Christopher, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd say, Ma, I want to be Italian. She goes, you can't be Italian, you're Irish. I said, I want to be Italian. I want to be in the mafia. I want to be Don Corleone. About a year and a half later, The Godfather opened at a local theater, at the mall in Portland, Maine. And I begged her to take me. I said, I read the book. I got to see the movie, because I had seen Life magazine back then. Brando was on the cover, and there was a feature about the making of The Godfather. And I said, I got to see this movie. I read the book, and now I got to see the film. Well, I had never seen Al Pacino. Nobody had seen Pacino then. Pacino, Diane Keaton, James Caan, Robert Duvall, John Cazale, and Marlon Brando. I had never seen. I just was too young to have seen his movies like Streetcar on the Waterfront first run. I had never seen Brando. I'm 12 years old and I'd never seen a Brando movie. And I went to my mom the day it opened. We went to a matinee and I sat there and it absolutely revolutionized and changed and inspired and changed my whole life. I walked out and I was in a kind of a hypnotic trance of seeing what I had read, this fat novel on the screen, that film. And I didn't realize then, I knew in my heart it's the greatest movie I had ever seen, but still, touted as one of the greatest, if not the greatest film ever made. And she said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "What's going on with you?" And I said, "I can be Italian now." She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Now I know what I want to do with my life. I want to do that. I want to be in the movies. I want to be an actor. And that way I can be Italian. I can be a cowboy. I can be a soldier. I can be a baseball player. I can do anything." And she looked at me and she said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "If you want to do that, you do that, Christopher. You do that." And I always had her encouragement. I grew up in a single parent family. She loved my career. She's no longer with us, but she loved everything that I did and saw all my shows and all my films and all my work on television. And she never was one of those, "Why aren't you going to law school or medical school?" So it was The Godfather most definitely changed my life. And then most recently, a city has changed my life because I lived in big cities my entire life and career. It was New York and LA. I mean, 10 years in New York and 25 years in LA. That's 35 years of my adult life. And incredible years, but I spent them basically in two cities. And it was when I went to Minneapolis that I decided to, I was doing a lot of theater, as you know, Billy Joe. I changed my whole career. And I said, I'm going back to the theater. And I had a theater company on Cape Cod that I worked with every summer. And then I was working the winters in South Florida and the summers on Cape Cod. And I couldn't have been happier. That's why it makes it so easy for me to say going back to the theater was such a good thing for me. My kids are all grown up and out of school. And I'm all about, now that you're grown up, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you grow up? Well, I'm all grown up now. And so are my kids. Now I could have a little bit of liberty to do that. But then when I got this call about this opportunity in Austin, Texas, what I found here was a community that is really on fire. People here want to make movies, and it's about independent film. And that's the closest, you know what? It's got that theater kind of community mentality, like you all pull together. People here want to work together. They want to know each other. There's not a lot of bubbles like the bubbles in maybe Los Angeles where you can't really break in. Here, there's so many different networking capabilities and people want to work together and people are always, reaching out and referring others to us. So the most recent thing is finding a new great city where there's incredible creatives in a supportive environment.
Do you find it's a little more, I guess, or I'm just getting your opinion, like, do you think it's a little more free because it's new? And I think maybe the thing that Atlanta and Austin have and other places like that, like because they're not LA or New York where everything is so entrenched, whereas here is like everybody's trying to do so. It's like, so you can't really going out there and trying to block everybody just ends up being counterproductive for everybody. So like we all like, the whole community just kind of has to pour itself into whatever, might have a chance of getting out there. So you get this actually kind of this beautiful kind of like supportive vibe. Like I know like in Atlanta, I'm always impressed by all the different actors and different like filmmakers around here and how supportive everyone tends to be of each other. It's not just like, oh, we got to go shoot that guy down because he might be competition. Instead, it's more like we got to get this out for Atlanta, or in your case, like we got to get it out for Austin because we're trying to prove to the world that we can do it. We can be just as good as New York or LA.
Well, first of all, this is a phenomenon because it all started with Canada, particularly Vancouver, runaway production. And when I was in LA, it was really the beginning of runaway production. When I was at E, people were freaking out. 25% tax credit in Canada. It didn't start in Atlanta or Austin or Albuquerque. It started in Vancouver and then Toronto. It comes down to money, because we are ultimately, if you're doing, studio films and network television, it comes down to corporations that have shareholders, and all they care about is the bottom line. But they do care about their product, but it's really the bottom line. If you work in a chair factory, you got to sell more chairs. You work in a mattress factory, you got to sell a lot of mattresses. You work at the studios and the networks, they're trying to sell product, and you want to make your mattress for less, then you got to go for the states and those regions that have the tax benefit. There's a better quality of life, perhaps. There is also no personal income tax in Texas. It's a very welcoming environment. It's a business-friendly environment. There's a lot of varied landscapes, and geographically, you can be in the desert in the morning and in downtown Houston in the afternoon, and it looks like New York. It's a major megalopolis. It's the number 2 or 3 city population and size-wise now, I think, one of the top 3 or 4 cities in America. Same with Atlanta. How many shows that are, New York or LA based that are shot in Peachtree Plaza, right? You know what I mean? Because it looks, an urban downtown in America is an urban downtown, unless it needs to be unique to New York or LA. And you get that in second unit, your second unit crew, So I think a lot of it is economic, but it also is a quality of life issue. This is really different. The cost of living, the lack of personal income taxes, the measure of sanity that you find. I mean, Georgia's a sweet state, although it's challenging because when people gravitate to an area, this area is exploding and the infrastructure isn't growing as fast as the population is. And we saw that in Atlanta as well. Atlanta traffic, you guys know, I've been on the LA expressways and the Long Island Expressway in New York. Hey, Atlanta's just as bad. Austin can be rush hour, downtown Austin. These are metropolitan areas. Houston, terrible traffic.
I will say this, having been to LA, going out there, excuse me, regularly to visit, my in-laws and other family out there. The difference between, I think, Atlanta and LA traffic is, in Atlanta, yes, we have rush hour, but it lasts for like a few hours at a time. Where in LA, it's rush hour 20 hours a day.
It is. Yes,
okay,
it is.
But I want to throw down and say, I've heard from people who have experienced both who say Atlanta's worse. And I think the problem is that LA, you're still on a grid. Like, there aren't geographic things that get in the way in LA. Atlanta, everything is a cul-de-sac because of all the ravines and all the hills. And so there aren't the same number of through streets. There
and
just
I think
aren't.
Atlanta has worse drivers. Definitely.
Yes.
You got everybody out here. You got everyone driving like they're auditioning for NASCAR, and then all the roads were made off of old horse trails.
Yep, absolutely. All
and
of
LA
that.
has, 14-lane highways. The infrastructure in Greater Atlanta hasn't kept up with the explosive growth, and I see the same thing happening here. But it's worth it. It's not going to stop us from pursuing our artistic endeavors, is it? No.
No, I feel like Atlanta is just one of those. They're at some point Atlanta has to get on the idea of public transportation, because it's like, I always say, like, so part of the problem I say with California, or like Los Angeles in particular, they have New York's overpopulation problem, but they don't have New York's organizational skills.
Right.
I was saying yesterday, I'm like, imagine if we put a walkway above Peachtree and it was bike and walk on the top and everything below was the cars. You know what I mean? Like, think about, because New York is super walkable. Like, you can walk anywhere in New York City. I've walked almost top to tail in New York City. But here, because there aren't sidewalks everywhere, and because there's geographic things that get in the way, you can't do that here in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's the case in Texas, but I know, like, with it, part of the thing is, I think in Atlanta is because, being like a native Georgian, there's this weird kind of love-hate relationship. And I don't know if this is maybe Texas has the same thing with, like, the way with its big cities. So I always like to tell people there's Georgia and then there's Atlanta. Right. So, like, you've got, like, Atlanta, the big scary city and everything that's entail with that. And there's maybe some not so good, attitudes coming from the rural areas looking in to the city. But it's also that kind of thing, whereas I think it's not like we're New York, this just everyone just like, okay, it's the big city, just embrace it. Let's figure it out. I feel like it, and in Georgia, and then I don't know if you can tell me if this is the case with Texas, like where there's that resistance to just like doing things. Sometimes it might just be helpful because they kind of don't want to completely square up with, get that, like the out, in Georgia, they call it the perimeter, OTP and ITP, inside the perimeter, outside the perimeter.
Right.
Because like, and it's kind of like that, kind of like you've got Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, where that's considered kind of like, okay, you're within the city. But outside of that, it's like the rural areas. And there's always, on one hand, they love the money and they love the prestige, but they hate like all the stuff that comes along with the big city, some for good and for ill.
Well,
is that the case in Texas? Like where, like, say, like Austin in Texas?
Yeah, Georgia's a big state and Atlanta's a big city, top 25 city. But in Texas, we have the biggest continental state, so it's mostly rural. Great people. But 4 of the top 25 cities: Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and Austin. That's a lot of big cities in one state. That's like California. You've got San Diego, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, right? Big towns. And the Greater Bay Area. No, that includes, I would include Oakland with San Francisco. But, the populations are exploding. And I think in our business, it makes it more daunting in a way because we have to get to auditions. We have to get to auditions on time. We have to get to our call time. We have to get to our call times on time. We have to be able to move freely about the city. Mass transit is very important, but it's non-existent. There's local buses and some streetcars, local rail, light rail in Austin, but you can't get to where I live 20 minutes outside of town on mass transit. It's a car state. And it's a big state. People drive an hour and a half to go grab a beer and a burger, because, we got to go to New Braunfels tonight. We'll go down there, listen to some music, get a beer and a burger. It's an hour and a half. There's a burger. No, we're going, it's like people love to travel around the state. But also, here's the other thing. This is really cool. I love trivia. Do you know that of the top 3 locations in the history of motion picture, the top 3 locations for all the movies ever made in the past 100 years, are California, New York, and Texas. And Texas is in the state that is third. And we're not just talking about Westerns or zombie movies or chainsaw massacre films. We're talking about, over 10,000 films have been shot in Texas, over 80,000 in LA, and over 50,000 in New York. But the thing is, the first film to ever win an Academy Award for Best Picture in 1928 was a silent film called Wings, starring Clara Bow, Buddy Rogers, and a young guy in his first film role named Gary Cooper. And I did a whole story about this when I was producing segments at E! That first Oscars was held at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in the Orange Blossom Room. I've been in that very room. The history of film lives right there on Hollywood Boulevard. And that film was shot entirely in Texas. And there's been a lot of really great projects shot here, a lot of famous films, and particularly in the Austin region. Austin by far leads as far as locations in the area. Like Atlanta, there's been so many great shows and movies that have been shot there in the past 25 years. But in the past 100 years, it was kind of a nascent business for locations in Atlanta. In the history of film, I think the recent history of film, there's been a big tide change to the East Coast and to greater Atlanta around Georgia. So what are you seeing? I'm just curious, what are you seeing in the marketplace for the future and the growth? Because I think it's got to be number 1 or 2 as far as production volume goes. It's 1-2 with LA. I mean, we're not just competing here. We're competing against Georgia. We're not competing with LA.
Yeah.
Georgia's killing.
A couple of years ago, to answer your question, a couple of years ago, right before I moved here, my boyfriend was in extras casting, so he cast background actors, And that year, when I came here for the conference, for the VoiceOver Atlanta conference, he said that Atlanta had surpassed, I believe, had surpassed LA that year in sheer numbers of money. I don't know about number of productions, but in money of production. So, yeah, I mean, it is like that. But like you said, it's that tax credit. If that tax credit goes away, that could change. So it's hard to say what might happen.
And I'm hearing Charlotte's trying to get in the mix too. But there's again, because it's like one state away, and it's similar. Like North Carolina is similar to Georgia. You've got the variety of different kind of landscapes, and then you could go downtown and kind of get the urban flavor, and then you can go out to the country, and then they've got like that little. They got the coastal area, so it's a very similar, and they're trying, from what I'm hearing. A lot of people will refer to Charlotte as kind of like Atlanta, where they were like maybe 20 years ago, or maybe not even that far. So I definitely think and then I'm hearing like Tulsa. I have a friend of mine that lives out in Oklahoma, and he said that there's a lot of stuff going on in like around Tulsa now, and just Oklahoma in general. Like, so they're trying to get in the mix.
But I don't remember Minnesota used to have a tax incentive a long time ago. And I think they were one of the first states in the U.S. to have a tax incentive, because in the 90s, production in Minnesota was huge. Yeah. Speaking of your friend, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he did Jingle All the Way at Mall of America. Yeah. Tim Allen shot a movie there that I was in. Mallrats. I mean, a lot of these movies, Grumpy Old Men, shot in Minneapolis, shot in Minnesota. But then the 2002 strike happened, and the tax incentives also went away, and all of that dried up in Minnesota. So there have been people there trying to change that back for years. We have come up just past the hour, and we need to wrap it up, but I wanted to ask you one final question, which is it's an easy one. We can, but I guess it's more of, I think it's an easier one. If you were to give any advice, any one piece of advice to people who kind of feel like they, for whatever reason, be it a full-time job or having kids and a family, or just feel like there's too many obstacles to create the thing that they want to create, do you have any advice for them on being more proactive and how to get there?
Yeah, I think your passion will be your power, and your propulsion, your passion. Let's go back to gift set. If if you've got it in you, and other people will see it in you, and you can inspire others, even though you don't have money, position, or power, you can still see the spark in people. So, as I go back to encouragement, the most important thing is, if you want to pursue an artistic career, if you want to be in film and television and the theater, if you want to act, write, produce, direct, be a creative executive, do movies, do theater, do television, then do it. How do you do it? You press on. Just like the name of this podcast. You break, scratch, claw, use your fangs, your teeth, everything you've got to lean forward, press in, and always be pursuing your work. Repetition is the key to success. Keep going at it, and keep going at it, and keep going at it. Read, go to museums, see movies, read great literature, go to the theater, take class, networking meetings, stay connected with other people. People in this industry, like I said, the very first couple minutes we were talking, most of the work that I've gotten in this business has been from people I know, not just raw auditions. There's a lot of those, but you start building a network. And the more you work, whatever community you're in, New York, LA, Atlanta, Austin, Vancouver, Singapore, I don't care. The more you work, the smaller the business seems to get, because you have kind of a shorthand and a familiarity, not with only how to navigate and ply your craft and trade and be employed in your marketplace, which can be ever expanding as you work more, but you get to know your colleagues. The most important thing is to always be working, because in what we do, it is a collaborative art. and we depend on others, and we want to be connected with others. So here's the thing. You want to play piano? You go play piano. You can play piano alone. You can practice the trumpet, play golf, you can sing, you can dance, all these other artistic and athletic endeavors, many of them you can do on your own. But if you want to act, besides just running your monologues 10,000 times, which I highly recommend, that you have a basket full of material that you can pull out at the drop of a hat, that you continue to work with others. And the way to do that is stay connected with others. Invest in your career, take class, go to networking events, go to mixers, support others, stay communicated, stay connected, and press on and press in. There's more work than ever. There's people that want to hire you. They don't even know you yet, and you got to let them know that you're there. Never relent, just do it and keep doing it, because I'm telling you, I've seen people that through sheer tenacity have had incredible careers because they wanted it and they knew they could do it. And I just want to encourage everybody to stay in it. It's a beautiful life. And when you work, it's an amazing experience. And the people that we're surrounded with, if you hit it just right, there's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it. So press on.
All right.
You can add press.
Before we go, where can we find you on the internet if people?
Where can you find me? I'm Chiz Chisholm. You can check me out on IMDb or on LinkedIn. Christopher Chiz Chisholm. My mother actually named me Christopher Andrew Matthew Bartholomew Chisholm. Wouldn't you shorten it to Chiz? That's been my handle my whole life professionally. The only one that ever really called me Christopher was my mother. Christopher! Other than that, since fourth grade, I've been Chiz Chisholm. So, and I'm really happy to see you, Billy Joe.
Awesome.
You know, I follow you all the time. I don't post a lot, but I do follow my friends, and I'm proud of what you've built there in Brandon. I'm really happy to meet you. And anytime you want to chit chat, I'm happy to be part of it. And if I'm in the area, I'll come see you. And you too, if you come to Austin.
Oh, yes,
Absolutely.
please do.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Scratch Claw Push. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. For a full list of our podcasts, go to carcuttamedia.com/podcasts. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for use of brief quotations in review. Copyright 2023 by Carcutta Media, LLC. All rights reserved.